Hello, and welcome to What's Your Story? Our guest today is a very interesting lady. She is a women's empowerment mentor and a women's embodiment coach or mentor, and she blends feminine embodiment, emotional mastery, and introspective practices to guide women in reclaiming our personal sovereignty and transforming our lives. With over a decade of experience, she helps clients excavate subconscious wounds and limiting beliefs, fostering self compassion and inner power. Through her compassionate guidance, she facilitates a journey for authenticity and steps into fulfillment, creating a safe space for growth and self love. And this is all something that I think all of us can use a bit of. So, my guest is Sapha Pardo Heckman. Welcome, Sapha. We're so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful because it's such a great topic. You know, I'm very involved in the Women Entrepreneurs Association, and I hear women all the time saying they don't feel like they're good enough, they don't feel like they can do something, they don't have self worth. So it's really a thrill to have you here because I know this is your specialty, and I've got lots of questions for you. So let's start out with what is your background and how did your path lead you to what you're doing today? And I know it had something to do with a yoga mat.
Yes, it did. So it just started with me absolutely crying, ugly tears, snot running down my face on my
Oh
yoga mat, which
no.
I never thought would happen. And I wasn't prepared for. And I didn't really know where it was coming from. And it took a couple of really introspective weeks, months, and years to see what was underneath. And really, what it came down to was that I was completely dissociated from life. I was disconnected. I was in a very deep state of self-loathing, self-denial, self-dismissal, self-depreciation. I didn't like who I was. I didn't know who I was, and I didn't believe that I had a place in this world. I really, truly didn't see that. So, what really ended up happening was there's this really beautiful alchemy that takes place when our bodies and our minds and our hearts come together and they have conversations. And that's what was happening on that yoga mat. That day, what was happening was all of the emotion, all of the trauma from the past, all of the self rejection, the self loathing, all of the things that I had internalized that had gotten stuck in the cells of my body, because that's what happens, were being moved. They were creating their, I was creating space for them through the breath, through the presence of mind. And it was giving me enough time to pause, to stop the role of, okay, I just wake up in the morning, I hate my life, I hate myself, I don't like who I am, I'm just going to keep doing this thing because it's what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not here, I'm not present. It was stopping that. And it was giving me enough time and breath to sit down with myself and have a really true and honest conversation about what was showing up and what was in the way. So that's really very much where I started. And then it evolved into a true, thriving passion and want and desire to see every single woman in this world reclaimed in their power, recentered in their true self, and really truly falling madly, deeply in love with who they are. Because at the end of the day, I know that we like to romanticize a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we are the ones that get to have a sustainable, long lasting relationship with self. And if we don't take care of that relationship first, there is just so much that falls to pieces. And for me, watching that through the eyes of the people that were around me, through the conversations that we were having, that I was hearing echo back some of the same old narratives that I struggled with. For example, I had an eating disorder, and a lot of the people that came to the yoga class, would come up to me after class, because I became a teacher eventually, and they would always ask, "What do you do to stay so thin?" And while I love the understanding of where that comes from, my heart really bled, because I didn't want to see more women disconnected from themselves. I wanted to take the conversation further. And so that's where it started. I just wanted to see every woman re-empowered, to shift the narrative, to no longer have this like stick, you know what I mean? Like where it's like, oh yeah, I like myself, but only if I'm a size 2. I like myself only if I can blah, blah, blah. And so I wanted to start making those shifts. So that's where this all really germinated. That's where the little seedling got planted, was me crying on my yoga mat.
Wow, it's amazing how many of us have issues with our bodies. It's like if I'm not tall enough, if I'm not thin enough, if I'm not smart enough, if my nose is too big, or my ears are too big, or my hair is cut funny. I mean, we just have issues, and it's how and when are we going to ever get over that?
Mhm. It really comes down to our own personal willingness to have conversations with self. So, one thing that I always say about my work is that I center around that art of feminine self embodiment and liberation, but I really focus on personal self reclamation through sovereignty. And a lot of that has to do with learning how to fall in love with the self. It's a process of self seduction. Mindful self seduction is what I've coined it. It's what I love to work with. And the reason why this is such a potent medicine is because we spend a lot of our lives thinking that we are not a whole person and thinking that we don't deserve the same love, the same care, the same understanding, the same time that we give and that we allot to other people around us. It's so easy for us to spend time with someone face to face and heart to heart and listen to them and pour into them and love them and care for them and cherish them and not judge them, right? And that when it comes to us, there is always this thing. We're always judging. We're always self defeating. We're always putting all of these narratives, all of these things, all of these as long as statements to the idea of I can love myself as long as. And we
Mhm.
put all of these caveats in place. We put ourselves in these boxes, and it won't change just by waking up every morning and writing affirmations. It's not going to change just by journaling. It's not going to change just by understanding up here. It's not going to change just by consuming self help work, by going to therapy. These things are amazing and they start opening the doors to the possibility of more. What really helps is learning to fall in love with the self. And falling in love with the self means taking yourself out on dates. And I don't just mean get out of the house and go and have like a candlelit dinner. This is cool. This is good to do. But what I mean by that is imagine or try to remember what it was like to have a crush on someone and to want to know everything possible that you could about them, the excitement, the idea of literally just asking, what is your favorite color? And all of a sudden that became the most exciting piece of information you could possibly get from someone, which when you think about it, it's so menial. But how often do you do that with yourself though? And that's just a little piece. If you're willing to start getting to know yourself, if you're willing to sit down with yourself and ask the big questions, if you're really willing to embrace every part of who you are instead of immediately trying to judge or change or belittle the things about yourself that you think that make you too much or not good enough or whatever else might be getting in the way of you being who you are. If you don't make time for that, it's very difficult to change the narrative. And it's we can move little by little and take little steps, but the depth, the full falling madly, deeply, truly in love with yourself comes from a really deep rooted place of self awareness, self seduction, self embracing. When we get to a place where we can embrace ourselves more so than just putting up with ourselves, that's when things really start to change. And that's when the narrative really starts healing, not just our lives, but the people of the lives around us, because that impacts the future generations and that impacts how we show up for ourselves in this world. Because at the end of the day, we do tend to believe so little of ourselves that our self concept is very frayed. And it's very tied to all of these as long as statements. As long as I make 10K a month, as long as I can fit my size zero jeans, as long as I can provide for my family, as long as I can. And there is never this point where we just say, I love myself, perfect or not. And I'm never going to be perfect. And that is going to be okay. And I love myself. And I am going to show up for and with myself every single day of my life and have that self concept develop. That's where the change and the magic really starts to happen.
But so many of us were taught you're not supposed to be in love with yourself. You're not supposed to walk around, uh, scratching your head out here because your head's so big. You're not supposed to uh, think more of yourself than you do of someone else. And I find that fascinating that our culture has really developed that for women, especially. I mean, men have been allowed to brag about themselves almost all their lives, but women are not allowed to do that, more so today than ever before, which is so exciting to see that women are really taking their power and starting to fall in love with themselves, and to know it's okay, because this
Mhm.
conditioning has been bad, hasn't it?
Mhm.
What
It's
have
so
been,
damaging.
yeah, what have been some of your biggest obstacles, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, gosh. So personally for me, what really started changing the trajectory of my life, and I joke and I say about the yoga moments and everything, but really what started making the biggest difference in my life was the realization that I didn't truly know who I was. It's it's such a weird sensation to wake up in the morning and feel completely disconnected from living this life. It's like so weird to just go through the motions, just do these things, but have no connection to them. And what starts to happen is when we're in that space, we create and we move into spaces in our life that keep us feeling stuck and that very much leave us feeling like we were at the effect of everything. That's very much where I was. I really thought it felt like to me, like everything was happening to me. Any kind of trauma that I had gone through when I was young had happened to me. It was something that was like an aggression that took place in my life, and I was at the effect of it, and I didn't know how to move through it. And the world kept moving and was constantly informing me that I was too much or I was not enough, all of these things, right? These are all ego based perceptions. And so all of this was happening. And I was so deeply tied at the effect of this that I kept wrapping myself in a world and in dynamics that informed that pattern. I ended up getting stuck in a toxic marriage that lasted over 13 years. And I say that now and I laugh because I'm actually really grateful for the experience. However, it was difficult and it took a lot for me to get out of there. But I also ended up going deeper into the eating disorder. And I very much like I was so dissociated from life that there are chunks in my memory that are completely gone from my life. So that's where I was. That's the position that I had really allowed myself to get into as I gave my power away to the circumstances. I gave my power away to everything outside of myself. To me, everything outside of myself was bigger than me. I was insignificant. And not only was I already insignificant, I needed to make myself more insignificant because for some reason, even the little bit that I took up was perceived as too much. It was like too grand, too vast, too poetic, too not within the box of what this world had told me to be. And so I just kept shrinking myself further and further down. My voice was disappearing. I had completely disappeared. And it's so interesting when you start having those conversations with yourself because those were exactly the kind of things that I had really been needing to hear the opposite of for so long in my life. But I didn't need to hear that from my therapist. I didn't need to hear it from my mom, from my brothers, from my friends. I needed to hear that from myself. I needed to know that I understood and that I knew and that I could be that person. And once that started happening, everything started shifting. The dynamics that seemed unchangeable completely transformed. The facility, and I say this not to say that it was easy, but the availability for me to show up for myself and walk away from that toxic relationship was there. The eating disorder completely like stopped in its tracks, and that's something that's, if you've ever experienced that, people, it feels like an impossibility. It's like walking with this perpetual ghost at your side, right? But this was like a complete shift, and all of a sudden the world was no longer something that was castigating me for being alive. It was where I got to show up to this world and say what this life got to be like. And for me, that is personal sovereignty on a whole different level. That has made my entire life so much more delicious, so much more worth living, so much more enjoyable, so much broader, vaster. And it just makes every morning it worthwhile to get up. Where for like a very long time, that just wasn't something I could say.
Yes, what is the importance of personal sovereignty? I just heard you say that. And what does that really mean for us?
Mhm. Personal sovereignty is radical accountability and ownership of the self in the most beautiful and well balanced way possible. Meaning, personal sovereignty is about centering ourselves. It's funny because you earlier said, especially as women, we have actually been taught that the concept of self importance, right, or self concept, self conceptualization is wrong. And this is one of the biggest wounds that we have been inflicted upon, or that we have suffered as a collective, but as women, because we've been told time and again that we have to self sacrifice, that we have to live for the other people in our world, that the only way that we are good people is if we put ourselves dead
Mhm,
last.
mhm,
Personal sovereignty asks the complete opposite. Personal sovereignty is center yourself at the center of your world, because not because you're being selfish, but because you're being self-aware, because you're being self-loving, because you're being self-devoted, and because you're understanding the import, the impact, the worth, and the value that you hold in yourself exactly as you are, without anything else. None of those qualifiers, none of the extensions that we were talking about earlier. You just know that you are worthy exactly as you are in this moment, and you are valuable, and you have the right to a wonderful life. There is no settling. There is no bending over backwards to please everybody at your own expense. Personal sovereignty is that space where we say, call yourself to be the center of your world. You are the main character, not in a ego based, I'm better than everybody needs to kneel before me kind of way. It's not about that, because that isn't even sovereign. That's not sovereign, and it's not self aware, and it's also not loving, and it's not any of these things. That's not taking ownership of your life. On the contrary, taking ownership and having radical responsibility for who you are means showing up and saying, hey, this isn't okay. And I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to move through it. I'm willing to show up and hold myself through it as things transition, as I choose to change, as I change the narrative, as I transform. I'm willing to say that I am important enough to walk away from the things, the people, the places that are not serving me anymore, and to know that that is radical self love, and that it means that I am worth my salt, that I am a worthy, valuable human being. And sorry if that isn't the story that you wanted to hear, but it is about me. And it's such a beautiful way of self dedication. Personal sovereignty is also understanding that you are the one at the helm. I said earlier that I felt very much like I was at the effect of the world. I really felt like, I'll put it in story form because this is how my brain best understands things. But it's kind of like watching one of those movies or reading one of those books where the character just gets tossed around, and it's like everything is happening to them, but you never really see the character take full control of their circumstance or their whatever's happening. It's not, things are happening to them, but they're never the ones driving the plot. It's the opposite. Personal sovereignty is you're the one at the helm. You're the one who's driving the plot of this story. You don't just sit there and say, life is unfair and it's always happening to me and it's awful and woes is me. No, you get to wake up every morning and choose, yeah, I don't feel good today, and I'm going to choose better for myself. And I'm going to ask, who do I want to be? And I'm going to decide what steps I'm going to take when things are hard, when it's not so easy. Because I think a lot of times it's so easy for us to focus on just the positive, especially like the world that we live in. We've gotten so good at putting really pretty pictures around healing and really pretty words around what it's like to become embodied, to become the women that we want to be. And it's good, but we also want to continuously remember it's not about the pretty pink picture. It's about when those dark clouds come in, the person that you get to choose to show up as matters greatly, and it has an impact on the rest of your world. So personal sovereignty is it's about show up. It's not about forcing yourself to do things when you don't want to. It's not about settling when you know that something isn't good enough for you. It's not about bending over backwards. It's not about saying you matter more than me. It's about, no, I am centered in myself and I get to choose. And sometimes, by the way, we choose to keep going down a path for a little bit longer even if it's not perfect, because maybe that's the medicine that we need. And that's a conversation that we don't often have. Like, how many times have you been told, well, okay, this is not helping healthy for you, it's not helping you, and you want to go down that path a little longer? Okay, but keep being present with yourself, and you're choosing, you're the sovereign. So that's personal sovereignty.
Wow, that you are so smart. How did you get this smart? You're so
Oh, I
young to be
appreciate
smart.
that.
I really want to share this this video with someone because the a lady came to a luncheon where I was recently, and she sat down next to me, and she said, "I wish I could be somebody." And I just, oh, my heart just went out to her. She wanted to be somebody. And I said, well, you are somebody. Why would you think you're not somebody? And she goes, no, I mean like somebody, that people know who you are, somebody important. I said, you are somebody important. And I find that interesting. How can we, you talk about mindful self seduction. How can we get someone like that to do that for themselves? And how do we tell them what it is, and that it's okay to do it?
Yeah, I needed to feel that because I was that person, and I get it. Like, I really, truly, from the very bottom of my heart, I understand what that feels like. And all I can say is it comes down to how willing you are to reach for that. If you say, I really want to be somebody, let's say, and you don't fully believe or understand or know yourself to be somebody, because you 100,000% are right now in this moment. I always say this, exactly as you are, without changing a single iota. You're you are worthy, beautiful, valuable, amazing, and you don't need to change anything. Now you can. But if you just were saying, I want to be somebody, then tell me about the somebody. Tell me about the dream. What does that somebody look like? Tell me the narrative of what that somebody is. Who are they when they wake up in the morning? To your perception, what do they do that is making them a somebody where you may perceive yourself as not being one, even though you are, right? What is making that? How do they act? How do they talk? What kind of life do they live? Where do they live? How do they dress? This sounds so silly, but the reason why this is important, and this is the process, part of the process of mindful self seduction, is asking the questions. A seduction isn't just me getting completely naked and telling you to come and get it, right? Like, a seduction is a whole process of getting into the space, getting into the energy, getting into the vibe of wanting to want more of you. So, getting to want more of you means asking questions. Get curious. What turns you on? What about this concept of being somebody is so appealing to you? What does it mean? What does it tell you? Where do you feel like you have not seen that in your life? And what does that tell you about what you've experienced and the things that you have believed in your life to be true? And where do you want to move in with personal sovereignty and start shifting the earth around? It's almost like plowing, or, plowing the field. You're taking the earth up, you're planting new seeds. And from that, you're going to move yourself into a space of proactive creation, proactive living, proactive being. So you want to anchor into that. So the process of mindful self seduction is a getting to know and getting to know deeper. It's not just asking why. A lot of times, if we ask why, we get a little into the self punishing space. Why am I like this? Why am I not going to change? Why? It's about asking who, what, where, when. Notice that I'm not including how in there either. How is going to get us stuck is the thing where we're like, oh, but I don't know how. I don't know how. And we just keep saying, I don't know how. And we don't move past who, what, where, when. Like, tell me, who are you? What is your concept of yourself? If you really believe that you are a nobody, okay? And I'm not denying that we sometimes feel that way. Tell me. Tell me the story of this nobody. Tell me where that comes from. Tell me about yourself. Get to know yourself. And the more you start to really tease out the pieces together, the more you start to see the big picture, the more you pull away from, because a lot of times we see things only this little. We have to start zooming out in order to see the bigger picture. Once we have the bigger picture, we're able to understand better where it's watching one of those paintings that's done with like little
Mhm.
teeny tiny dots, right? If you pull out, you see the whole picture, but if you're just closing in, all you see is this one little dot, so you think there's nothing there. But so if we pull you back, if we aggrandize things, if we have a conversation at a bigger scale, that's where the process really starts to take on a new life on its own. Because before you know it, you're going to be like, oh, I'm understanding this a little bit differently. And before you know it, this is where we go into the world of creating our own reality. You're like, but like, I really want this for myself. My idea of what being somebody is like is waking up every morning, having my coffee and sitting down and having my client calls. And like, you get excited about the things that bring you to life. And then you work toward getting them. And you work toward getting them without putting this as long as on you. It's not you are somebody as long as you have the things that you dreamt that you wanted to have. You are somebody as long as you show up for yourself in truth and you show up for yourself in your power and you say, I am choosing better for myself right this moment, in this instant, today, right now. It doesn't matter that I'm feeling sick. It doesn't matter that my heart is broken. It doesn't matter that things are difficult right now. I am still showing up for myself and I am moving through it. And this is who I am. Because that is what gets that fire going. It's what reminds you of how amazing you are. And the one thing that I always say is I really, truly, from the bottom of my heart and soul, believe in people's power. I don't believe anyone is broken. I don't. I believe we stretch. And in that stretching, sometimes little tears happen along the way. And that just makes us stronger and it makes us more powerful. But I believe in people's power from the bottom of my heart. Everybody is worthy. Everybody is valuable. Everybody is a somebody on a greater scale that we can ever possibly imagine. And sometimes that doesn't look the way that we think we want it to look. And that's fine. That's part of the self seduction. Like I said, sometimes the self seduction isn't just come and get it, right? And sometimes it's something a little bit different.
That's amazing. You're going to be speaking at the Women Thrive Conference in March. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Are you speaking on this subject?
I am. I'm going to be furthering this so much more. We're going to go deeper into the realm of personal sovereignty and what it looks from the place of divine femininity, because this is like my love language. So I'm so excited.
Oh, I imagine. You know, I did Women Thrive last year, and it was absolutely a wonderful experience. And I met so many fabulous people. I know you're having a great year already with them. Thank you for being here with us today. We're out of time. I'm so sorry because you're so smart, and we're learning so much from you. And I think every woman in the world needs to hear you speak. So I'm going to encourage them to go to Women Thrive and hear you some more. But tell my audience how they can reach you if someone would like to contact you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. It's just been such a delight and a pleasure. If you want to get a hold of me, I'm on Instagram a lot. I am at Your Soulful Goddess because you are a soulful goddess. So that's the name of my company, Your Soulful Goddess. And then you can also reach out to me directly by email, info@yoursoulfulgoddess.com. I have a podcast called Mindfully Sovereign, comes out bi-weekly. So if you feel like getting a little reinvigorated, you can also find me there. Of course, the Women Thrive, which I'm so excited, but I'm always around.
Thank you so much. We've really enjoyed having you here today. And thank you for being with us today for another one of our wonderful women from around the world that have been giving us such great advice. And I hope you'll come back again real soon because we have a lot more fabulous guests for you to meet.